Well, mastering conflict, let me define what does master mean. A lot of times people think of master as perfection. And I really like the definition of master, and what I use is master isn't necessarily perfection, but it's process. And the true master is one that continues to keep entering in and evolving, falling down, getting up, falling down and getting up again. So the master is one that stays in there, exploring and learning how they can move with it.
Welcome to the Laws of Business podcast. Here, we will share the skills you need to make your business a success. Learn about goal setting, productivity, time management, marketing, and much more. Hear inspiring stories with today's best business leaders and join a hub of thousands of passionate entrepreneurs across the world. And now, here's your host, Jamil Jama.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Law of Business podcast. I'm your host, Jamil Jama, and I chat with successful entrepreneurs. And today I'm chatting with Karen Valencic. Before we start the interview with Karen Valencic, I'd just like to give you all a intro, a bio of Karen. As an author, speaker, black belt, she's a black belt as well, so don't mess with her. And an engineer, Karen's passion is revealing the keys of conflict to leaders so they can fast-track innovation and enhance performance. Karen knows the best ideas in business all too often are lost in the maze of poorly handled disagreements. Therefore, the ability to innovate with conflict is an essential skill for leading edge businesses and people. Karen's unique method combines physics with martial art concepts for an eye-opening take on the way we engage with each other and with life circumstances. She has consulted, trained, and coached inside organizations for 20 plus years, focusing on propelling leaders and their teams ahead of the curve in performance and innovation. Karen also speaks at conferences, providing high-impact, entertaining programs with practical tools attendees can take away and implement immediately. Some of the publications Karen has made. She's an author of Spiral Impact, the book Spiral Impact: The Power to Get It Done with Grace. She has a handbook giving deliberate feedback for leaders, and she also has an audio, Spiritual Balance and Focus While Driving. That's not an audio book, is it? It's just where is that, Karen?
Yeah, it's an audio recording. So it's designed to, while you're driving or riding the subway, to listen to. And it's kind of a guided visualization as part of the work.
Karen, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show, Karen. I want to thank you so much for taking your time out to do this interview. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure, Jamil.
That's awesome. And so, Karen, before we get to the questions, just could you give us an overview of your backstory from when you started until where you are right now, please?
Well, sure. I began my career actually as an engineer. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I worked in product development for a division of General Motors here in the States. And I was one of the very first women in that company that was an engineer. And what I realized back then is that being able to have differing opinions and have disagreements and be able to be heard and have influence and engage was something that I hadn't learned in school. And I actually was introduced to the work that I do now, or a type of the work I do now, at a dental conference. And it had such a big impact on me that I thought, this is going to be my next career. So I really started this business out of a need for learning and realizing that I think almost everyone that I know could benefit from being able to handle conflict in a way that they can master it and use it, because it's something that's very natural. It occurs all the time, whether you want it to or not, and it's a matter of how do we move with it rather than resisting it so that we can keep momentum going. So that's my backstory. And I started this work, gosh, actually it's been 25 years by now. And I love what I do. I mean, it's just fun to be able to see people's faces light up when they realize they don't have to struggle so much to get things moving in a direction that they like.
So, Karen, how can someone master conflict? How can leaders master conflict? Initiate momentum for results.
Well, mastering conflict, let me define, what does master mean? A lot of times people think of master as perfection. And I really like the definition of master, and what I use is master isn't necessarily perfection, but it's process. And the true master is one that continues to keep entering in and evolving, falling down, getting up, falling down and getting up again. So the master is one that stays in there, exploring and learning how they can move with it. So that for me is what the definition of master is. And really I talk about the art of conflict. And what I mean by that is art. Art is one of those things that everyone experiences differently based upon their background. And you can look at, you can have 5 people that witness an event, and all 5 of them can go away with a different impression of that. So conflict, in a sense, there's an art that goes with it, which means that we all experience it differently. And so just because I have a conflict with a certain situation doesn't mean everybody else in the room does. So that's what it is. And I might also say, Jamil, that I define conflict as strike together. So if your listeners would take both of their wrists, or if they're sitting with somebody else, one make a fist in the other, and just push your fists together and feel that tension. That's what conflict is. Conflict, by definition, the etymology is to strike together. And so recognizing that you've got that conflict is the most important thing. But most people think of conflict as destructive conflict, which pushes too fast, too long, or too hard, and it really stops things. So as you're sitting there pushing your fists together, open up one of them. And my company is called Spiral Impact, and that's really about learning how to, rather than going force against force, you use a spiral to stay engaged and move with. And so that's the model that I use.
And if somebody wanted to influence with or without authority, how can they do that? Because example, somebody like Tony Robbins, he has huge authority.
Yes.
People will pay him more, but there are some psychology work. There are some psychologists that are better than him, but because he has authority, people pay him more. So how can you influence with or without authority?
Well, and I tell you, most of the people that I work with, and actually often when I speak, I'll poll a room and I'll ask people, how many people require people doing things with, to do their work, they need the help of others that don't report to them. And so how do we engage with people that we have no authority over? And you're right, Tony Robbins has a lot of presence and a lot of authority, and certainly he's a very large man with a very large presence, which may work in his favor sometimes, but maybe not. I think it's Tony's mannerism, and actually what I teach people is part of that is your actual presence. And so we talked about centering before with my recording. That's about being a calm and powerful presence in terms of being, good posture, being centered, being balanced. And then there's also the aspect of, a lot of times we think that if we tell people what to do, they should listen to us. But it's more subtle than that. And actually a great tool to use is to be asking questions rather than telling somebody. And so a lot of times when we think we can influence, we can have this great idea that we just tell everyone about. And that rarely works, because people tend to shut down unless you are an authority. People will tend to shut down listening to what you have to say until you ask them and learn about what their openness is to information. What, do they even value what you're talking about?
So you have to build a relationship with them.
Yes, you do. Yeah, so you've got to know who your audience is. And quite honestly, if when people choose to come and listen to me speak or hire me as a coach, I have authority, because they have already decided that they want to work with me and they want to know what my expertise is. The tricky part are those people that when you're working with peers or working with your superiors, how do you find that voice where you can engage with them? And a big part of that is really looking at the world as they see it, and asking them questions, open-ended questions about what's important to them. So that's the key. It's also being really clear on what your intention is, and I think that's another thing we forget a lot when we're talking about conflict is when we start talking, what's our intent? And if I look at everyone as, my intent is to get you convinced to do this my way, people feel that. But if my intent is, I really want to partner with you so that we can create the best thing for each of us and for the organization that we're working with. And so that goes internal as well as external. It's like looking at what's, at the end of the day, what's our grandest intention so that we can focus on that. But so often we lose influence because we're trying to force our opinion or our method onto someone else.
And what are the open-ended questions again? What, when, and where? Who, how, and why?
I avoid why a lot of times. Well, if there's conflict, if there's tension, why tends to create a defense. For example, Jamil, if I say, why are you doing it that way? Why? So, but yeah, why? Tell me more about what's important to you. I love that. Tell me more about this. Help me understand what your process is when you do this. What would success look like to you on this? Yeah, there's a lot of questions are really rich, and I find so often when I work with people, it's the power and the and what's I think so helpful is me being able to ask really good questions and listen for the answers. Because when you think about it, if I just try to tell somebody this is what we need to do, there tends to be a wall that goes up. And whereas when I ask a question, it engages a person's brain and has them start to think around the subject that's at hand. So one of the key tenets, one of the key things of spiral impact is to turn your statements into questions and acknowledgments. Yeah. So
ask good questions, show interest when listening.
Well, not only show interest, but be interested.
Yeah, be interested. Genuine interest.
Yeah, genuine interest. Because again, it's like a puzzle. And, I have a physician that I've been coaching recently, and he works in situations where a lot of family members are involved. And something that he said to me that I just loved, he said, now when I'm speaking with family members, I kind of look at it as a jigsaw puzzle. Each one of them are different. And what I need to do is to really ask the questions to each one of them to understand where they're coming from regarding the patient. And that way, I know how I can address each one of them in a way that really honors and engages with what their needs are. So, and I love that analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. It's like whether you're trying to influence someone to purchase a product or service that you provide, it's really looking at how do I put all those pieces to that puzzle together as a whole so that I can really understand what their picture looks like. So a lot of times when we're thinking, traditionally wanting to influence, we want to force our own picture onto someone else. But through asking really great questions, you can help your client or your colleague actually create that picture. So does that make sense to you?
Yes, it definitely does, Karen. And Karen, you mentioned your coaching. You've been doing your work for 25 years now. Have you been coaching for that amount of time as well?
Yeah, when I started out, when I began my business, I did more training. And that's probably a sign of the times, because back when I started, coaching was not as popular as it is now. And so a lot of what my business is, it's really exciting because I do diverse things. For example, I will do speeches to large groups, which are, hour and a half long. I will do consulting work with clients where it's a combination of training and coaching leadership. So a lot of times I'll go in and I'll do a training program with people, and then I coach the leadership in terms of how do they support the ongoing movement of the change that we're trying to do. So, and then I also do online coaching and individual coaching as well. But the bulk of my business is really doing consulting and speaking. So, but it used to be back when I started training, doing, 2-day training programs was something that was more in vogue. But as time has gone on, and I think people's schedules have gotten tighter, and also recognizing that people learn better over time. So doing something that's spread out that's shorter and spread out over more time is usually more effective.
And how can someone align clients, partners, and departments, even with competing agendas or broken communication?
Yeah.
Do you understand that question?
Pardon me?
Do you understand that question? Do you get that question?
Yeah. So when you think about most organizations, and I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening, and a business, every business requires a different skill set, and most of the time those skill sets have competing agendas. And for example, a small, I have an entrepreneurial client that I've worked with over a number of years, and they are a small manufacturing company. They build large products, but they're kind of a small scale manufacturer, sales and service department. And certainly, the salespeople can go out and sell all kinds of things. And then, if they're not, they have an agenda around getting sales quotas. And so oftentimes salespeople will make promises that might be in conflict with the manufacturing group. So they need to really have a relationship in which they are aligned with what they can do and what they cannot do. And that may seem really obvious, but a lot of organizations miss that. And then even in the manufacturing, you've got the materials people, you've got the quality control people, you've got the new product development people. And they all kind of, the new product development people oftentimes are in conflict with the regular production people, because they're often requiring people to change the production method, which again creates some pushback because we've already got a system that works, so don't try to change it on us. And then of course, entrepreneurial companies often attract people that have maybe a little bit more dominant or strong drive, which inherently in their personalities can be very conflict driven as well. So there's all those dynamics. And so what I find is teaching people what conflict is and what tools they need in order to be able to engage in a way that honors each one of them really moves the organization forward. And a part of that, what I do with organizations too, is really help them articulate what they want as a culture. And I usually take them through a dialogue process, which engages them talking about what's important to them in terms of the way they engage. And we create what I call a credo, which is a short list of yes or no questions that they can then hold themselves accountable to. And that's really powerful because oftentimes, particularly entrepreneurial companies, they start up and, as they grow, the culture gets defined by the strongest personality, good or bad, in the organization. It doesn't even have to be the leadership. It can be somebody that works there that's just got a very loud or dominant personality. So in order to hold that in check, I help them define what that culture is that they all want. And that's always an eye-opening. Those are always eye-opening conversations. I love it.
And Karen, I read somewhere that I read a research that most people lose their jobs because they have conflict with other team members. They can't get along with other workers. Like two-thirds of people that have lost their job, it wasn't because they couldn't do their job properly.
Right.
They couldn't get along with other workers.
Yeah, there's a relationship. The ability to get along with other people and engage is an incredible skill. And I find that a lot of employers will hire on personality and train people the work that needs to be done. So because if you can't get along with other people, you end up just taking, it's a downer. It can be a real downer to be around you and create. Yeah. So, absolutely.
And there's a sorry, Karen.
And I have taught my course in a college curriculum, and I've had some of my students reach out to me and say, I use your material in conflict more than anything else I learned in school, and that's not really surprising to me. So,
that's awesome. And
yeah.
There's a quote that team together, everyone achieves more. How do you engage team members for excellence in operations, Karen?
Well, I have several ways of doing that. It kind of depends on what the situation is, but again, a big part of that is what I had just said is I really engage them in dialogue around how is it that they want to work together, and that every group I've worked with, and I've worked with many of them. It's different depending on the dynamics of that team. So, and again, it's just helping them find the ways to be able to talk and engage with each other that they don't feel like they're beating up on each other. So, I think typically you've got people that are really overt and are willing to say anything, and then you've got people that are really afraid to speak up because they don't want to be beaten down. So most organizations have a variety of those people in them. So it's again teaching them the skill and having them the agreement in terms of how do I express myself in a way that I feel safe and I feel like I'm contributing. And again, the two I think most important parts of that are beginning with questions. Again, asking the questions around what would it be important to you if this widget would do this procedure? Have we ever thought about doing something this way? Yeah, so there's, again, it's hard to create a generality around that, but really allowing people to, understand the just simple tools to be able to do that. Being really clear on intent. My intent is to make sure that we have our safety concerns met. And what do you think would happen if we changed this dimension on this part regarding safety? So because when people are asked questions, they're much more open to provide answers. And again, when you get a culture,
talk less. So ask more and talk less.
You ask more and talk less. Listen more and talk less. Actually, so ask questions and listen.
Sorry, yeah. Listen more and talk less. We've been given 2 ears and 1 tongue, so we should listen more than we speak, right?
Right, absolutely. And that's easy to say. It's harder to do, particularly if we think we've got something everyone else needs to listen to and know about. So, yeah.
Yeah, Dale Carnegie talks about this in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You should ask questions and listen. Talk less, listen more.
Yeah, and he wrote that book a long time ago, and we're still learning it.
Yeah. You read it, by the way. You obviously read it, right?
Oh, yeah. It's been a while, but yes, I have read it. Well, and Jamil, the one thing that we haven't really talked about so far is, my book and my work is grounded.
Sorry, Karen, I was going to ask you about your book next.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 more questions, and then we're going to get to your book.
Okay.
There's one more question, and then we'll get into your book. Sorry.
Okay.
So, Karen, things are always changing. Things are changing very quickly these days.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do people navigate the transitions required to align their businesses and people with change? Do you get that question?
Oh, so say that one more time.
How can somebody navigate the transitions required to align their business and people with change? Basically, how do people keep up with change?
Oh, really important question right now, because I think things are constantly changing. And let me answer that a few ways. I tell you, my work is grounded in a martial art called Aikido, which is all about position rather than force. And Aikido, there's a constant movement that's happening there, and really being present again and centered to be able to see how things are moving and be able to adjust yourself to whatever that changing condition is. So when leaders are experiencing change, preparing people for it in terms of being ahead of it so that people aren't surprised by the change, and also providing skills for people. And I think that's a concept that we've kind of touched on a little bit here, but that idea of what I call centering, which is it's a psychophysiological state. So it's mind, body, and spirit of balance that allows people to stay calm, stay in what I would call the calm eye of the storm, so that they don't freak out. They don't freak out, and that they stay balanced through all of that. And I think the other thing with the change is I had a woman that I was coaching last year called me last week, and she shared with me, she's a very competent person, and she's also very much a detail-oriented person. And one of the things she said to me, she said, this company that I'm working for, it's like they make a change, and then by the time we get used to it, they make another change. And she says, it's like, I feel like my productivity is so low because I can't make this change and adapt to it, and they're already doing something else. And I shared with her, I said, remember, you're part of a team. And because she also made the comment that she felt like they were just, kind of throwing darts at walls with some of these changes. And I told her, I said, you're a valuable part of that team. So rather than looking at yourself as a victim of these changes, look at yourself as someone that can provide some feedback and some really good questions about those changes. So rather than feeling like you're out here and they're changing everything, come into and engage with the people that are making those changes, so that you can partner with them. And so you can kind of give them information around it as well. That probably works in a smaller organization, but in a larger organization, the same thing is true. Is rather than looking at yourself as a victim of these changes, look at, for one, what about those changes are going to help you do your work better, and the organization to provide whatever they provide better. And but as leaders, you've got to recognize people need the support, they need the time, and they need some compassion around how to make those changes. And I think a lot of companies right now there's a word called change fatigue, which is there's just too many changes right on top of each other, and it's overwhelming to people. So how do you support them in all that?
Yeah, the martial art, the martial art you do, what is it called? Aikido.
It's called Aikido, Aikido.
I used to do martial arts as well. I used to do Jeet Kune Do.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee invented that, and the MMA, mixed martial arts. I haven't done this for a long time, and I haven't done it since 2005.
Aha. Yeah, I've been doing Aikido for 27 years, and I love it. And, one of those aspects, part of our practice, which is if you did mixed martial arts, you might relate to this, we do the thing we call Dory, which is you have multiple people attacking you at one time. And that certainly is like business today. You've got all these different things going on around you, and, you've really got to, you got to stay centered and aware and really be calm so that you can see the solutions and see what's coming next. And I think so often what happens when things accelerate, I like to use the analogy of, if you're in a hurricane, where's the safest place to be? It's in the middle, in the eye, not on the outer edges. And we all have an ability to find that calm, balanced place inside of us that we can then direct where we go, rather than being at the mercy of those bands of the wind whipping us into oblivion.
So Karen, would you also advise entrepreneurs to get into martial arts as well? Because that teaches discipline and hard work as well.
I think it's an individual thing. I love my practice. It's very physical and it's very demanding and it takes a lot of time. And I love it. I think depending on so I highly recommend it, but I also know it's not for everyone. And so if that appeals to you, Aikido, I was always fascinated with martial arts, but I was kind of afraid of getting hurt. And Aikido, depending on who your teacher is, it's much more of a movement flowing type of thing than a getting beat up kind of thing. So we really study relationship in it. So if you can find a really great Aikido teacher near you, by all means, practice Aikido. I'm not sure in London how popular Aikido is, but I know France has got a gigantic Aikido schools. So yeah, I certainly always would recommend martial arts. I also recommend swimming. But I think physical movement is always good. So, and dancing is also really great. Aikido is a little bit like dancing, the fact that you've got a partner typically, and you're kind of having that connection and moving with and together for the most part.
So Karen, you're a black belt, an engineer, and an author as well.
Yes.
Your book, Spiral Impact, The Power to Get It Done with Grace. What is your book all about, please, Karen?
Well, my book will describe to you in detail around what is spiral impact. Spiral impact is a method to deal with conflict and change or any life circumstance. So I wrote it to be a very easy read. There's some short stories that model all the concepts in there. And so my book really follows my philosophy in a very deliberate way. So it's a very easy read. And I love my book.
Where can people find your book? Is it on Amazon?
The book is on Amazon, and it's also on my website. And actually, I have a package on my website that you can get the book. You can get my centering CD or download of the CD. I also have another deeper centering guided visualization that I do, and then I have some like little cards that kind of summarize material that I include in that as well. So, and then the book, Giving Deliberate Feedback for Leaders, that's available as a free download on my website.
That's a handbook, right?
Pardon me?
That's your handbook.
Yes, that's my handbook. And it follows along with the regular book as well, although it's valuable even without the regular book. So that's on my website. So. And
you also have an audio. Is an audio for when someone's driving. Strengthen
your balance and focus while driving. So it's a recording that has a 15-minute segment that is all about what the concept of centering is. It has a short segment about how to sit in a car and be for optimal breathing and attention. And then there's like a 15-minute guided visualization if you're going to your work or starting your day. And then there's like a debrief for the end of the day. And it has classical guitar behind it. So yeah, that's there too. And I do have my book, my Spiral Impact book is also available in audio recording as well. And I think that's available anywhere. So
awesome. So Karen, it was if anybody wanted to, where can you be found if people wanted to contact you?
So the best place to find me is from my website. It's the easiest way to remember that is spiralimpact.com. spiralimpact.com. My contact information's there. My email address is there. I have a mailing list that you're welcome to join. I send out about once a month a little story that's relevant to my work. I also have a semi-weekly question of the day I put out to a smaller group of people that are really wanting to have continued to support in the work. So those things are there. I also on my homepage have a really interesting slide that I talk about how conflict is like water and what the cost of conflict is. So that's a nice narrated thing that I think that causes you to think about how conflict could be costing you money, and you might not even realize it. So that's on my homepage. There are also, I offer a couple 30-minute free consultations. If you take a survey, I've got a couple surveys on my website that one is for people that are considering wanting me to do coaching with them. And the other is for people that might be wanting me to work with their teams. And that's take the survey. It kind of gives me an idea who you are, what you're thinking, and then we can schedule a 30-minute consult. So my website's got a lot of things on it. There's some fun videos of how the Aikido fits into the concepts, and I think that your readership will find those very interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely will. Karen, I want to thank you so much for taking your time out to do this interview. We learned a lot. Thank you so much for your for the value you gave.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Jamil, and thank you for having me on your show. Appreciate it. I'm all about spreading the word. Spiral Impact.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in. I'm sure you got much value from this interview. If you know anybody else that will be interested in listening to this interview, please share it. Please also leave a comment and subscribe. And I'm your host, Jamil Jama. This is the Law of Business podcast, and that was Karen Valencic. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Laws of Business podcast. Find out more about us on thelawsofbusiness.com. Thank you for being a part of our journey.